I often get asked about training for the Cannonball Run. What kind of training do you? What kind of training you do? For most people, there's not a lot of training that goes on. But doing it solo, I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable driving more than 24 hours with the fewest amount of stops possible. I'm semi-retired, small farmer, and these days, but I managed to get a side gig job doing emergency deliveries for what I call a defense contractor. I got the job of a friend who knew that I drove a lot, was a former delivery driver, and they had a situation that through traditional shipping, they couldn't get the product they're fasting. And his friends said, I know a guy might be able to do it. Let's call him. And they called me and said, can you help us out here? You get this part? I said, sure. So we'll come get it. I come get the part and get it there. And they were amazed at how fast and how I was just easy to work with, and still am. If I can help a business, like I said, defense contractor, it was U.S. Coast Guard ship wasn't moving. A manufacturing facility that hundreds of employees sitting there idle, that costs people money. And country needs it, especially right now during, the lockdowns, the COVID time. And if I could help keep things moving that needed to be moving, I was happy to do it. It kind of does feel like, the Jason Statham transporter. You got to get it there as quickly as possible, knowing for whatever situation that people were depending on you. You had to get it done. And they would call me up and say, hey, how fast can you deliver this part to the Coast Guard station in Portland, Maine? And we got the part ready, and it has to be there yesterday. So I would take on the job, get it to Portland, Maine, and faster than a plane or any traditional shipping company could get it there. Sometimes I wouldn't hear from them for 2 or 3 months. Sometimes I might make 4 or 5 emergency deliveries in a month, going all over the country. One time I had a situation going to outside Minneapolis, Minnesota, that there was a manufacturing facility that had over 300 employees that was sitting idle until I showed up with this one part to get their manufacturing line running. I used them as training for the run, and I developed systems of things I needed to keep in the car with me, food, supplies. So my only stops were for fuel. Pull over, gas up, get in, keep those stops down to 3-4 minutes and keep going. Wasn't doing cannonball speeds on these runs, but I could drove from North Carolina to Portland, Maine, back to North Carolina in 24 hours without stopping. Mobile, Alabama, and back in 18 hours. To Minneapolis, Minnesota, and back in 36 hours. And so using those runs really helped as practice and legitimate training. And some of the systems I developed, and some of that come from Steve Brown, the previous record holder, is having all the food and supplies you need at your fingertips. So you're not taking your eyes off the road, fumbling around. Have little baskets set up and strapped down in the passenger seat with water, food, energy drinks, something else, wipes, baby wipes. After 4 or 5 hours on the road, you feel grungy. Really wash your face. Wipe yourself down a little bit, refresh yourself. And every 5 or 6 hours, I would brush my teeth. Going a long road trip and you get there and you feel like a herd of buffalo has been running around in your mouth. Sometimes just simply brushing your teeth will perk you up and wake you up and make you feel refreshed. One time, and it was shortly after the musket ball, they called me and said, do you want to go to California? And I said, not really. I said, I was just out there. I don't want to go back to California again. And they said, well, this order is big enough that you're going to need a trailer. I have a small utility trailer that I occasionally use, mostly for personal use, but occasionally for these runs. And I said, well, now I really don't want to go. I don't want to drive a Prius with a trailer behind it, loaded down with gear from North Carolina to California. And they said, well, pays really well. Here's the address. Call us with your rate. Well, okay. So I did the math, figured out my regular rate I charge them, added 30% to it. Called them up and said, here's what I'll do it for. They said, great. Be here at noon tomorrow to pick the stuff up. Like, geez, guess I'm going to California again. So went on Friday at noon, Picked it up, loaded up the thing in the trailer, tarped it all up, strapped it down, back home. Took a couple big heavy shots of NyQuil so I could get some sleep. Set an alarm on my phone for midnight. Woke up at 11 o'clock that night, wide awake. Said, all right, let's go. Pulled on a driveway, North Carolina, 11 o'clock at night. I didn't stop until 10 o'clock Sunday morning in El Paso, Texas. Pulled up my hotel app on my phone, booked a room, said early arrival, pulled in, took a shower, got some lunch, went to sleep. About 1 o'clock, woke up 10 o'clock that night, showered, got in the car, drove from El Paso, Texas to San Diego, California, made the delivery, left there, drove all the way back to Tucson, Arizona, got a hotel, spent the night, drove from Tucson to Houston, spent the night there, and drove from Houston, 1,000 miles to North Carolina. So I went from leaving my driveway on Friday night, drove to San Diego, was back in my driveway on Wednesday night. So how's that for training for a cannonball run? And I did it pulling a trailer behind a Prius of all things. I've purchased 3 Prius. I have a 3rd generation with my first one that I bought used. It's the one I predominantly use for those deliveries. It has about 220,000 miles on it. The Prius I did in the cannonballs, my wife's car is 2017 model. It just has 130,000 miles on it. And both of those cars, my car, the 2nd generation, has been into all 48 states, been to 12 Canadian provinces. The Cannonball car has been to 44, 45 US states, and I think 6 Canadian provinces. So we're on the road quite a bit. Between the delivery vehicles that I drove and wore out, the service industry vehicles, there's 3 or 4 of them that had almost 200,000 miles on them, personal vehicles. I've had 4 or 5 cars that had over 300,000 miles on them when I replaced them. So I'd say somewhere between 2 and 3 million miles would be a fair estimate. I'd probably have to sit down and come up with closer, better math on that. And no major accidents, no major speeding tickets, nothing crazy I couldn't come out of.
Buying a used car can be scary, difficult, and risky, especially if it's a long way away from you. And the perfect partner in that shopping process is the Lemon Squad. We want to thank them for their support of VinWiki this month, but I have to thank them for going out and checking out an Aventador that I found recently. It was actually a Lemon Law buyback, and it was yellow, just the perfect scenario to test out the Lemon Squad. And it's amazing how inexpensive it is for them to go almost immediately, like the next day, to check out the car in person if you can't get there. And of course, they uncovered tons of things, which made me even more excited about all the other things I was going to use to negotiate. And as I was doing so, somebody saw it online, did no inspection, and paid full boat retail, at least $100 grand more than the car was worth. So be sure to use the Lemon Squad to check out the next car that you're looking for, and hopefully they'll save you just as much money if the idiots don't find it first.